Hello and welcome back to another edition of GNAT-TV's In-Depth series. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director at GNAT-TV's News Project. It's a pleasure to have you with us today on Thursday, April 13th. It's also a great pleasure to be joined virtually by Vermont's Secretary of State, Sarah Copeland Hanzas. In 2004, she ran for state representative for a district that includes the towns of Fairleigh, West Fairleigh, and Bradford. That was successful, and she stayed on in the state legislature for another 18 years before running for Secretary of State last year, replacing long-serving incumbent Jim Condos, who was stepping down from the office. Secretary of State Copeland Hanzas, welcome back to the News Project. Great to have you back with us again.
It's really nice to be there virtually, and it's such a beautiful day. I wish that I was with you in person.
Well, we'll definitely see if we can make that happen in the near future, because that would be a lot of fun, and there's always things to talk about, for sure.
Absolutely.
Your office is an important one in the state government, and I really appreciate you making the time for the conversation today. Several things to talk about, but I thought perhaps just to get us started, tell us a little bit about what it's been like transitioning from state representative to Secretary of State. That's a bit of a different world, isn't it?
Well, it really is. You know, when you are a state legislator in a citizen legislature like we have in Vermont, the pace of progress is really only based on how fast you can work yourself. You know, you're building a coalition, you're talking with other lawmakers, you're trying to activate Vermonters to come out in support of a bill or a law that you are proposing. And all of that work sort of happens at the slow pace that you can do it as you're fitting in all of the regular legislative duties and your day job on top of that. So being here as Secretary of State is really exciting because, you know, when I have an idea, I have a team of people around me who can help implement that idea. And I hope that we'll have a chance to talk about some of the things that I am doing right now, you know, new initiatives that I think are really going to benefit the state of Vermont.
Well, we definitely want to make time for that, for sure. One of the things, though, I just wanted to start off talking with you about and hearing some of your ideas on the subject is the whole world of school civics education. I know this has been an important subject for you, and I just wondered, I guess, what do you think students should come away with knowing about government? I mean, what are some of the basic building blocks that you know, any citizen who's, let's say, graduates from high school ought to understand?
Yeah, you know, I think of it sort of on two levels. You know, the first level is, you know, there's sort of a basic understanding that that we want students to have about sort of the three branches of government and the checks and balances between the executive branch and the judicial branch and the legislative branch. But I think what I notice that is often a gap in people's understanding of how government works is sort of how does the state level three branches of government interact with the federal three branches of government, and who does what? So that's sort of the nuts and bolts, and yeah, it's important for folks to understand that. But I think what's more important for people to understand is sort of democracy at its essence is us being able to do collectively for all of us what we can't do as an individual, right? You can't build a road from where you live to Montpelier so that you can come and visit the state capitol. But we together have, you know, collectively funded the building of roads and bridges and basic infrastructure. And so, you know, what I think civic engagement needs to be as we move out into communities and start talking with Vermonters about it is not just that sort of dry, boring three branches of government, but how do you make your wishes known? How do you elevate a challenge that you and your peers are experiencing to the government in order to ask them to help solve it? And so yesterday was a beautiful day here in Montpelier. I had the window open, and out across the State Street from my office, the lawn of the State House was filled with parents and childcare workers and children having a rally and advocating for more public funding for childcare, because parents were saying, I can't report to work regularly because I don't have access to daycare for my young child. And daycare workers were saying, I can't afford to put food on the table for my family because our wages are so low. And so, just elevating common challenges to your government is really what civics and civic participation is all about.
And do you think, is it your sense anyway, that schools are not kind of getting that message across to their students as effectively as they should be? Or I'm sure it varies from school to school and all of that.
Yeah,
but
I think young people and adults, you take in what feels relevant to you at that moment. And so when we start to develop civics curriculum for Vermont school teachers, I want to make sure that curriculum is really grounded in in Vermont, in how to participate in your government here, because you may not internalize how to ask your legislator to introduce a bill that you think is important until you find something that is important to you. So, that basic understanding of how government works is going to be made more relevant by talking about real world applications for how you solve problems.
And do you think, there's been so much discussion over the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years about the increasing level of polarization and division within the country for one reason or another. And do you think having students and adults for that matter kind of become better acquainted with how government works and how they can interact with government effectively is something we really need to kind of be thinking about more, so that if someone does have an issue that they can bring to either their local select board or town council, whatever, or to a state representative, they know how to go about doing that in an appropriate way.
Yes, I think that is a very good point. And that increasing polarization, I think, has come about in part because people are frustrated. And, when you're frustrated, you sometimes lash out in ways that may not be very helpful. It's sad to say, but every single week, either through social media channels or by email, or sometimes even by paper letters, my office gets, pretty rude and threatening messages from people who are frustrated. And so I think what people need to understand is name calling and threatening are not really very good ways to get things done. What you need to do is you need to come, sit down face to face, have a cup of coffee, talk about what you're frustrated about, ask the questions, and seek to understand why is your government not doing what you think it should do? And as opposed to sitting behind your keyboard and, making snarky messages on social media, that's never going to solve anything. And frankly, I would rather sit down and talk with someone that I disagree with than to lob bombs back and forth at each other electronically.
Do you think that's a pandemic-related phenomenon, or was that sort of activity or the behavior of kind of snarky, threatening letters or whatever, was that already part of the scene prior to 2020?
Yeah, I think it was part of the scene. I think it's been growing for a while. It's a lot easier and a lot less intimidating if you're mad about something to just fire off a message electronically. But at the end of the day, that's not solving anything. Writing to my office or tagging someone who works at the Secretary of State's office with some angry vitriol isn't getting your ideas out there in a way that would perhaps help you find allies who might petition with you to do what it is that you think we should do. Or, sometimes people who are getting angry like that simply are refusing to listen to the fact that the majority who has already spoken feel differently than they do. And I know that's disappointing. I've been in the minority and lost on things in the past, and yeah, it's disappointing. But at the end of the day, you're only hurting yourself if you just keep churning around in that negativity and poison. Find a way to bring something to light that does create you an alliance. And keyboard warriors are not growing a strong following, I don't think.
I'll remember that term. Well, one of the hallmarks about Vermont politics, anyway, has long been considered our March town meeting, where, in theory, everyone from the community, or most people from the community, come and sit down in the same room and hash things out, talk about the town budget, elect people to the select board or whatever, and and as you just said, maybe you don't always come away on the winning side of that, but at least there's an opportunity for a conversation, and everyone gets to say their piece. But I know there's been a lot of conversation going back at least 20 or 30 years now, and probably longer than that, that is suggesting that, well, town meeting in that classical sense of the term from the 19th century isn't really working as well today as it used to. I mean, particularly in larger towns. It may work pretty well in smaller communities, but in towns where your population is 2,000, 3,000 or more, the number of people or percentage of a checklist that shows up and then votes on the town budget or whatever is a fraction of,
Yes.
of the number of eligible voters. And that paper ballots are kind of a more democratic way of going about it.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what your feeling is about that. Do you think that town meeting in its classical traditional sense has a future here in the state, or are we just at a point where it's kind of time to move on from that?
Well, the beautiful thing about our form of government in Vermont is that each community gets to answer that question for themselves. And you hear a lot of debate back and forth in communities about whether to stick with that traditional town meeting where that you can't fit the 1,500 or 2,000 people who live in your town into the town hall to have that meeting. So it's by its nature going to be less inclusive, I guess I would say. And there are many different ways that communities have tried to solve this over the years. Some communities have moved from a daytime Tuesday meeting to an evening meeting or a Saturday meeting in hopes of being able to be more inclusive of people who have to work. Other communities have moved part of their town business to an Australian ballot while holding on to some aspect of an in-person meeting. There's only one large community in Vermont that I know of that does a representative town meeting, and so that's Brattleboro's way of solving the challenge around how do you, in a fairly large community, how do you still maintain the benefits of a traditional town meeting. And before I describe representative town government, I want to just put a plug in there for some of the beautiful things that I've noticed about in-person town meeting. And that is that I have seen many times over the years, participating in my own town meeting and also visiting other towns, is that people they come with their ideas, and at the end of the day, the town budget might change. It might go higher, it might come lower, based on the conversation around the room and the debate around the room brought by different citizens. So this past year, our town tree warden proposed at town meeting that instead of increasing our salt budget, we should be decreasing it. And he laid out a whole bunch of examples of the impact of too much salt on trees along our roadside. And we had this wonderful, 20 or 30 minute debate back and forth. And in the end, instead of increasing the salt budget, we decided to level the salt budget and to talk about in future years other ways that our town road crew might be able to keep our roadways safe in the wintertime by using more sand instead of salt. So town meeting really does offer that opportunity to hear the views of your neighbors and to reflect on whether you agree with them and then to indeed change your mind about something. So what Brattleboro does is on traditional town meeting day, they elect representatives from different regions around the town, and those representatives come together a few weeks later and do all of the decision making that would ordinarily happen at a traditional town-wide town meeting. And they do that on behalf of their neighbors. So one person might be representing, several dozen of their, the households around their neighborhood. And in that way, they can seek input from their neighbors. They can take those thoughts and those sensibilities to the representative town meeting. And that's how Brattleboro does their town business, which makes a whole lot of sense for getting both the benefit of that debate and that opportunity to change your mind versus the Australian ballot, which at the end of the day, you would never have a discussion about whether our town road crew should try to use less salt in future years. It's an up or down vote.
Indeed. Well, continuing with this question around voting. Last year we had, of course, an election, and voting was a big question. How to go about it. In 2020, the first year of the pandemic, the state put through a mail-in balloting system that seemed to result in a lot more votes being cast than what we had seen before. And I guess I just wondered, do you think mail-in ballots should be continue to be kind of a big feature and voting made easier for folks to just sort of kind of increase the rate of voting? Because I know, it seems like every time we get above 50% of eligible voters voting, we go, wow, that's great, good turnout. But when you think about it, 50% is only half the electorate. And 80 or 90% should be maybe what we're shooting for.
Exactly. And, that's going to be a major area of focus of mine in the coming years, because I feel really strongly that we need to be looking at all the reasons why people don't vote, and trying to figure out ways to solve those. And so over the years running for my state representative seat, I would stand outside the polls in November and talk to my neighbors about, about the issues that were important to them, what are you thinking about? And, over the years, I would interact with people who were frustrated because they had tried to vote, but they weren't registered to vote. And so they were told by the town clerk they couldn't. So that was why we passed same-day voter registration, because, people move from one town to another, and sometimes you forget to register. And we passed automatic voter registration so that when you move to Vermont and you get your driver's license for the first time, you can be automatically registered to vote. So we've systematically over the years broken down some of the reasons why people don't vote. And the universal vote by mail is the next phase of that. That is putting a ballot on your kitchen table 45 days ahead of the election so that you can spend the time figuring out who you want to vote for, and then you can return it either by mail or in person, because many towns now have a ballot drop box, so you can drop it off anytime, or you can bring your ballot with you on election day and cast your ballot on election day. You don't have to vote early if you don't want to. So that's another way of breaking down the barriers. And this civic engagement priority of mine is really about breaking down some of the other reasons why people don't vote. Because, people have said to me, I don't vote because I don't know any of those people who are on the ballot. Well, if you're going to have your ballot for 45 days now, how about we also give you a voter guide so that you can look up all of the candidates and all of the offices and understand what the offices do and find the candidate whose values most closely match your own, who you think is qualified to fill that vacancy or to win that election. And, the voter guide is hopefully going to really help people understand, who the folks are who are on the ballot. That plus the increase in civic education and civic engagement, I think is another way to help increase participation in democracy.
And what do you think about ranked choice voting? Is that something that would be a good idea to implement, let's say, statewide, where you could vote for, a couple of candidates and the candidate, it sounds like to me like that's one way of kind of working through that kind of partisan division. You get to vote for a couple of candidates and, winnow down who winds up winning.
Right. So, one of the most appealing things that I've heard from folks who've used ranked choice voting in other places is this idea that if you're wanting to win a ranked choice election, you want to make sure that you're not alienating the people who support one of your opponents, because they may give their first vote to her, but you want the second vote to come to you, right? So it has the tendency to break down some of that really intense, and negative campaigning. Because it requires all of the candidates to be looking for other people to, hopefully put them somewhere on their ranking. So our office is supporting moving towards ranked choice voting for the presidential primary first. And we're not talking about statewide offices yet. We're not talking about local offices yet. We want to try it with that presidential primary because for one thing, it's a fairly straightforward election. Typically you may have some local ballot issues on March town meeting in 24 or 2028, but it's not a big and heavy lift for the town clerks to run their first ever ranked choice vote election. So the bill as it currently stands proposes to do this for the 2028 presidential primary. 2024, the clerks said, wow, this is really too fast. Because if you think about it, the preparation for 2024 really has to start happening in late 2023. So there isn't a whole lot of time to get that stood up. So ranked choice voting for the presidential primary also always makes sense because it's an election that has many, many different candidates. There's always more than two people on that presidential primary ballot. And for us, we vote in the presidential primary on a Tuesday in March, but there are many other states that will have already voted in the primary by the time our election comes. And so ranked choice voting for the presidential primary also ensures that if, for instance, your first place candidate maybe dropped out, 2-3 weeks ago because she, could see the writing on the wall and her campaign was not able to raise the funds that she needed to continue, a viable campaign. You don't want your vote to have been totally wasted, right? You want to be able to have your, perhaps your second choice counted in that case.
Well, in the few minutes we have left, you had mentioned at the start of our conversation you wanted to talk about some of the new initiatives. And I guess we've talked about at least a couple of them already, but what other new initiatives or ideas are you hoping to advance from the Secretary of State post?
Yes, these are really exciting, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. Our education and civic engagement position is now filled. She came on board this past Monday, so she'll be getting stood up a teacher advisory group so that we can ask for help, for input, for guidance from school teachers across Vermont in creating that civics curriculum. So if you are a school teacher in Vermont and pre-K through 12th grade, and you're interested in helping to advise and inform on the creation of relevant civics lessons for Vermont teachers, please do reach out to us. The other initiative that I'm working on is around residential contractors. So the legislature passed a bill that would create for the first time, not a licensure, but just a registration for home improvement contractors. So anyone who's out there doing home, residential construction and has projects that are $10,000 or more will in the future be required to register with our Office of Professional Regulation. The thing that I have started working on that hopefully will go live within the next month or so is, the Office of Professional Regulation has lists and spreadsheets of all of the regulated professionals that have to register with our office, but most of them are just in a spreadsheet format. And so for residential contractors, I'm asking our team to figure out how to put those dots on a map so that if you're a contractor, your business location will appear on a map. And that means, if I'm in Bradford and I'm looking to get some work done on my house, I'll be able to call up that map and see the contractors who are operating and in good standing in my area of Vermont, as opposed to having to scan a list where maybe you're new to Bradford and you don't know how far away Topsom is, right? And so I think that this map-based listing for residential contractors is going to be a benefit to consumers to help connect them with the professionals who are in their area. And it's also going to be a benefit to the contractors because it's just another point of contact out there to find customers for your business. And then the only other really cool new initiative that I wanted to talk about was, our relationship at the Secretary of State's office with town clerks across the state is a really important one. And so I recreated, this has existed in the past, a town clerk advisory group. And this is a group of 13 clerks from big towns and small towns, from towns that used a tabulator for their elections and towns that do hand count. And we're going to come together once a month and talk about all of the support, all the points of connection, all of the services that the Secretary of State's office offers to municipal government. And it's an opportunity for them to say, hey, we really wish that you would do a little more in this realm and a little less in that realm, or, that method of training is really flying over the heads of some people, or we need more of this kind of training. So I'm really looking forward to our second meeting, which will be next week. And it's been going great so far. It's a really good group of people and some good feedback for us on how our office can work better for municipal government.
All right. Well, we'll have to leave it there for today. But once again, Secretary Copeland Hanzas, thank you very much for making the time for this conversation. Look forward to seeing you again next time you're down here in southwestern Vermont. And
I look forward to it.
We can continue the conversation across the table here, whatever. But meanwhile, thank you again very much. Really appreciate it. Thank you for being with us, and hope you found the program interesting, and we'll see you again the next time. Meanwhile, take care.